Stephen, will you unmute yourself and talk? Keep talking.
Is that good?
Keep talking.
Okay, yeah. Hello. All in video.
You're like coming in and out. I'm not sure what that is.
My puppy's upstairs with my wife.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not coming at all clear.
Stephen, you are in and out. Like your audio is coming in
Really?
and out. So you're really staticky.
Oh, that's weird.
Why don't you log out and log back in?
Will do. Better?
No. So I'm wondering, so keep talking.
Okay.
And Penny, give me a thumbs up if you can hear Stephen.
Okay.
So you keep talking. I'm gonna make sure it's not on this end. All right. So give me a thumbs up if Stephen is talking and it's not staticky. Go, Stephen.
Yes, sir.
It's very sad.
There. Looks like a lot of people can hear me okay.
All right, so Kelly Bristow gave us a thumbs up, so apparently she can hear you clearly. So it could be that it's just on my end. Okay. All right, Stephen, so it's on my end. Stephen, talk to me again.
I'm doing good even. Sorry, what?
Okay. I was bringing that through the Bluetooth on my speaker, and that seems to be the issue.
Actually, you're breaking up on my end too a little bit.
Okay.
We can hear Stephen, but not quite.
Right, exactly.
One of the things I kind of like about these video meetings is that you can see everybody eating and having tea and coffee.
I know. All right, so I'm gonna reposition the computer so that it can bring up audio. I'm gonna ask everyone, if you're not muted, to go ahead and mute yourself. And we will start service here in just a minute. I'm gonna do some repositioning since I'm not using the speaker.
You can still hear me. I'm gonna mute myself.
Yes, I can hear you. We can hear you. We can hear you fine now.
So what that means is we're going to be doing that thing that you don't like. Where the people on Facebook are just going to see us, but we're not going to be talking. It's going to be coming from there.
Okay.
All right, we are continuing to learn and grow and work out the bugs of our computer system. So welcome to another morning of coffee, connection, and conscious conversation here at Unity Cafe. You can already see that I have Kat Rumschlag joining me this morning. I also have Stephen, who is joining us on Zoom. So if you are watching on YouTube Live or later on Facebook, you're going to hear them, hopefully hear him nice, loud, and clearly, but you will not be able to see him. So you get to see Kat and I's gorgeous faces for the next hour. We are so excited that you have decided to join us this morning and that you are connected to whatever electronic device you're connected to. I'm going to periodically be getting up so that I can see who's on Zoom and make sure that everything's going well. But we're really blessed to be gathered here. You can see that Kat and I are 6 feet apart, and we are in the sanctuary. We are making plans this afternoon with the board to reopen our sanctuary, and we will keep you posted. So make sure that you check Facebook, make sure that you check the Unity Fort Wayne app, and that you pay attention to your email blasts that come from us, because that will all contain important information about us gathering together back in this space again. And speaking of gathering, Kat, that's your cue.
All right, good morning. It's good to be here with all of you. And so just join in singing as you feel free within your home. And here we go. We have gathered here to feel the love. We have gathered here to share the love. We have gathered here to feel the love. We have gathered here to share the love. Gathering to see the beauty of community. Gathering to see the beauty that is you and me. Gathering to see the beauty of community. Gathering to see the beauty that is you and me. Oh yeah. Check out this one with you. We come together, our hearts in unity, shining our light for all to see. Open to spirit, joyful and free, sharing our hope for what's to be. Gathering to see the beauty of community. Gathering to see the beauty that is you and me. Gathering to see the beauty of our unity. Gathering to see the beauty that is you and me. We have gathered here to feel the love. We have gathered here to share the love.
And all God's children said, amen. Today, we light the Christ candle to symbolize our connection with each other and with God. And our affirmation is, I embrace a life of mastery. I invite you to say that affirmation with me. I embrace a life of mastery. Let's say that one more time. I embrace a life of mastery. And now if you'll take a deep breath in with me, exhale. I invite you to close your eyes or bow your head if that is part of your faith tradition as we open our service in prayer. We breathe in to that presence and that power that breathes us. We breathe in knowing that that same power and that same presence enfolds all of those that we hold in our hearts. We breathe into the power of love. We breathe into love that expresses itself as kindness, as service to others, as connection, as harmony. We breathe in to that light that shines in each and every soul on this planet. Feeling our connection to humanity and our connection to all that is. We breathe in. If there are people on your hearts this morning that you would like us to hold in this vibration of light and love, I invite you to whisper those names aloud now. We hold in this vibration Unity Fort Wayne, G and K, Kat and Bridget, UWN, Mary and Ron B, B and T, CTN, Andy, the Brown, the Bales family, Cheryl, the Harrells, Juan, Kaya, the Esons, Archer, Sherry O, the Westfalls, Bosco, G and J, Becca, Teresa, Patricia, Scott K. Jr. and wife, the staff and residents of Colonial Manor, Scott and Tristan, Anna B., Ramona, Judy L., Harriet, Barb B., Ruth B., Joy B., Helen R., Marilyn W., Dawn and Mary P. We breathe in, knowing that each name that has been whispered aloud and each name that is being held in our hearts this morning is enfolded in the love of all that is. That each and every person is surrounded by the light that shines in them, through them, and around them. We breathe into this time of prayer and connection, knowing that we are a spiritual community that thrives, that we are a spiritual community dedicated
to changing the world, changing our community, that we are together connected, bringing the light to others. We breathe in with gratitude and appreciation for our ability to connect, no matter what the circumstances are. And so it is, all women, all children. Amen. So Kat and I meet on a regular basis and plan the service. And as we were entering May, she and I had a discussion about what the series should be this month and what we were going to focus on. And as always, I always ask I'll ask the question in meditation, what is it that we need most? What are the spiritual tools that we need? What are the spiritual principles that we need? What is going to help us be the best version of ourselves that we can be right now? And what came to mind were all of the things, all the tools that I've been given by the spiritual teachers, the masters that have influenced my life and have been around me. And as I was thinking about the question, I remember something that my own spiritual teacher said to me. When we were all together in community, there was a point at which she said, I'm not interested in devotees. I don't need your devotion. What I'm interested in is in creating masters. Masters who will bring global enlightenment. Masters that will awaken the world. And as I thought about that and the circumstances that we're in, it became clear to me that as we begin to gather together again in different ways and learn different ways of connecting and being together, that now more than ever, it is important for us to step into our mastery. It's important for us to become masters. And so your question today, the questions that I want you to think about today and for the rest of May is, what does it mean to be a master? What is it? What is mastery? What does that mean? And am I willing to step up, to step in, to be the master that I was intended to be? And so, Stephen, would you like to share with us what it is, how you would define mastery, or how you would define what it is to be a master?
Yeah, sure, thanks. Well, I think I like your, on the little notes you gave me, there's the Webster's definition that you put in there of mastery being possession or display of a great skill or technique. So I think when we're talking about that term, it's important to recognize there's a couple different meanings to it. That there is the mastery of something, like somebody who is a virtuoso on guitar. They've developed this great mastery over the guitar or piano, or somebody that's developed some other artistic mastery. And that's genuine mastery in a sense of a skill or a technique. But typically in spiritual arenas, when we're using the word master, it means one of two things. One is what I consider to be self-mastery, meaning that you begin to identify with the divine in you more than you identify with the mental, the emotional, or the physical aspects of yourself. And that you give that divine dominance over the rest of your person. And that you turn to that divine when you're making decisions and speaking and taking action. And whatever fears, whatever emotions, whatever doubts may arise within you, that you're primarily identified with that divine in you, that inner light, that divine nature of Christ that's in you, and that you begin more and more to live your life out of that center. And as you choose that,
disconnected.
That
Ready
develops
to
what
pair.
we call self-mastery. The second feature is a little bit different to me, and when we talk about spiritual masters, like Glenda was talking about one of her spiritual teachers, Spiritual masters are not different in us in terms of capacity or nature, but they're different in us because, from my perspective, a spiritual master is somebody who is fully awakened to God in themselves and themselves in God. They're fully conscious of that. They're not tapping into it every now and then in meditation
Connected to SMJ260A.
but they're very, very aware, and in that consciousness, if you will. So not only are they fully awake to God, but being fully awake, they can help awaken those of us who are struggling to reach that, and give us a way or a pathway or assistance in how do we wake up to the reality of God in us and who we are in God. So I think the spiritual masters that we might think of, like Glenda's teacher or other contemporary teachers in the world who are in that state, or historical ones like Jesus or others that you may have considered to have been greatly awakened souls, that's a very, very high state of mastery. And before we get there, we go through smaller states of self-mastery, of gaining control over our own fear, of gaining power over our own doubt, and of stepping forward, like Glenda was saying, developing the willingness in us to step into that inner light and to act from that more and more often in our life choices and actions. So that's how I look at it.
So that may sound like a tall order, but you, us, being a master, or maybe it sounds like too much work, too much responsibility. But you know, what I've come to believe is that that's really why we're here. That we're here to become masters. That we're here to develop mastery. So Saima, who was one of my very first spiritual teachers, addressed us recently around this whole pandemic and what was going on and what we were witnessing. And what she said to us was, before your physical birth, you chose to be here now in physical form with me, to carry out an agreement, to fulfill your dharma, your purpose, to serve the planet in her upliftment. And I know from conversations that I've had with several people during all of this, it's become really clear to me that the pandemic is a blessing. Yes, it has caused stress and anxiety and struggle in us, but I also believe that it has called us to a higher consciousness, that it has been here to serve our good. And you know, as I was thinking about the masters like Saima that I've actually spent time with, and masters that I have read, like Paramahansa Yogananda, early on Saima recommended that we read Autobiography of a Yogi. And it is by far my #1 spiritual book. I loved that book. It really opened me up, cracked my heart open, and really started to wake me up. And when I look at these spiritual teachers, there are a couple of things that they have in common. The first is that all of them talk about how we are loved, how all of us come here worthy, that all of us come here as an expression of the divine, that we are and have always been perfect and whole and loved and worthy, and that there is not anything that we can do that will disconnect us from that light that's within us. And the other thing that all of them, no matter what the circumstances have been in the world, the other thing that all of them have said comes from out of the Bible. So Jesus said it too, that all good things come to those who love the Lord. All things work together for good. That's how it goes. All things work together for good for those that love the Lord. And that is one thing that Yogananda and Saima and many of the other masters that I have studied with and to have spoken of, is that the universe is not against us. I know I talked about that earlier in the year, that nothing is against us, that in truth, the universe, God, all that is source, is always conspiring for our good. Paramahansa Yogananda said this: "Your trials did not come to punish you, but to awaken you, to make you realize that you are part of spirit and that just behind the sparks of your life is the flame of infinity." I love that. I know that for me, as time has gone on, I've definitely had more time to contemplate and self-reflect, and more time to see what's bubbling up that's ready to be dealt with and ready to be healed. I've also had more time to take purposeful pauses. That's one of the things I love about leading the daily word service during the week, is it gives me an intentional time to stop and to plug back in besides my normal morning meditations. Ma said to us this week when she was talking to us about the pandemic, "We are moving through this global crisis together, and there will be more. What is surfacing are old patterns, fears, panic. At the very same time, what is emerging is that which is eternal, the awakening of humanity." Last night, someone sent me a story. I'm actually going to post it on our Facebook page. It was a little video of a young man like reading a bedtime story to his children. And the story was about the great realization of 2020. And it talked about how the pandemic had caused a shift in consciousness and how it had changed the world as we knew it and changed people and the way people interacted. It was a beautiful, beautiful story. So look for that on our Facebook page, because I'm going to repost it there. What it reminded me of is that in the midst of everything, I have seen people be kinder. I've seen people be more loving. I've seen people be more intentional about reaching out and connecting with each other consciously. So I'm really aware, I've really become aware of the good things that are happening in the midst of the media, in the midst of the death toll count and the positive cases count that we get in our emails, that there are also some really beautiful stories that are unfolding about how we are learning. In this story, he talks about how people learn to go outside again, and about how the earth healed because there weren't all the airplanes in the air and there weren't all the cars on the streets. And so the earth began to heal and people began to want to be in green space. And I was telling Kat earlier, I've spent all weekend in green space. It's been really good to be out in the sunshine and to be out in the grass and the woods again. Pema Chodron, she wrote a book called When Things Fall Apart. Some of you may know that. At the time that book came to me was the time in my life when everything was truly falling apart. And no matter how many times my sponsor said to me, "This too shall pass," I was like, it really needs to pass quickly, because I'm done. I'm over it. I know it's going to pass. Could it pass now, next 5 minutes, by tomorrow anyway? And she gave me this book to read, and it was really helpful in me understanding that the natural cycle of things is that they come together and they fall apart. Pema wrote, "We think that the point is to pass the test or to overcome the problem. But the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart." And I thought about all this energy around finding a cure, finding a vaccine, fixing it. And yet there's all these other things that are happening along with that. And I think as people have talked about this week about us coming back together again and everything getting back to normal, I can honestly say, if things are never normal again, I will be okay. That I really hope that instead of things going back to normal, that we are able to master this time and to have a deeper understanding of what it means when relationships are more important than the to-do task. When taking time to meditate, taking time to reflect is more important than going to Kroger's one more time, or standing in line at the bank, or driving here or driving there. I'm in deep appreciation that some of the busyness in life has stopped and some of the living life has started to take place. So I look forward to this time of us being masters and being masters of relationships, like learning how to show up as God in our relationships. And as we come back together and worship, and as we come back together and work, that we are able to do that from a higher consciousness, to be conscious, just to even be awake to what is happening. And so, Stephen, I would love, and I'm sure everyone else too, would love to hear about the masters that have influenced you and what they might have to say about what's going on right now.
Okay, thanks, Glenda. Yeah. Wow. I loved what you shared. I think that perspective is really important. And to me too, I see a lot of what you're talking about. So I just want to say that I think that was a really important sharing. And I think the refocusing on relationships, both our inner relationship with the divine and our outer relationship with one another, and seeing God, literally seeing God in each other and bringing God forward in our relationships. I think that's a blessing that certainly is unfolding as a result of all these restrictions and anxieties people are experiencing around the virus. As far as the masters who have influenced me, they're both past historical ones and contemporary ones, and I've been very, very blessed to be connected with a number of them. So I don't really have a lot of time to get into all of that, but the central one for me most of my life has been Jesus, whom I call Yeshua, which was his Aramaic and Hebrew name. But his teaching about the centrality of loving kindness, and that is the core, that love is the fulfilling of all the laws, and everything else falls into place when we do that. That's been a really central teaching in my life. And along with that, leading me to the understanding that really God is love. And that being true, all love is God. Whether you love your puppy, or you love your neighbor, or you love your child, or you love your friend, or you love your spouse, all love really is that essence of God that we're sharing through relationship. So Jesus has been really exemplary in that way for me. The other thing is, when you look at masters, what we're calling masters, their lives, it's not, a point I would like to make is, mastery is not a philosophical system that somebody teaches. Mastery is the way they are. It is their being in expression through their lives. So Jesus didn't teach about love. Jesus demonstrated love. He lived that loving. St. Francis, who's another one of my masters I really like, by the way, primarily because of his affinity with animals. I really connect to that aspect of him. But one of the things St. Francis said that I really like is that we are to teach the gospel at all times, everywhere. And when necessary, use words. So I like the idea that our presence is what is the teacher. And that's, when you look at the lives of the masters, they stood out. They weren't people that blended in invisibly to their own culture and their own time. They stood out. And as we step forward into our own mastery, we're going to stand out too. And it's going to have the blessing of people who are seeking to find that in themselves are going to be drawn to us, and they're going to respond to that with great love and affection and involvement because of the love they see in us. But people who are afraid of love, people who are still caught in the shadows of fear, may not respond to us so well. We may not always be the most popular in certain circles as we step forward more into our mastery. And so if that occurs, as you're unfolding yourself, remember Jesus' disciples, his advice to his disciples was, when the world says bad things about you or persecutes you, don't worry about it. They said it about me and all the other masters too. You're going to face some challenges as you do this, because not everybody welcomes that. It's for people who want to stay hidden in darkness, the light is intimidating to them. So there is that aspect that you may or may not, but you probably will have to deal with in some way in your life by stepping forward into your own mastery. The other thing that I want to say about the masters, I'll mention a couple other ones in a moment, but as far as what I've learned, that being the light is far more important than talking about the light, and that's what the masters do. They also talk about it, but it's their presence, it's the way they live their life that really conveys that. The second thing is they do stand out as a result of that, quite uniquely in their own environment, and so do we, or will we, as we step into that. The other thing I want to say about what I've learned from all of these different masters, whom I'll mention more of in a moment, is that they're consistent. If you look, Jesus is a great one because there's a lot of stuff written about him, but if you look at any story of Jesus and how he spoke and how he behaved and how he carried himself, if he was cloistered with his innermost circle of disciples, closest, most beloved friends and souls, he spoke, acted, and behaved in a certain way. When he was standing in the presence of his enemies who wanted to kill him, he behaved in exactly the same way. He was the same person. He was still calm. He was still focused. He was still at peace within himself. He was still kind and loving. He was still firmly truthful. He knew what he knew, and he didn't deny that. He was the same person, if you will, whether he was with his friends or his enemies, whether he was alone in meditation, because we have a lot of descriptions of that in the New Testament. He was the same. And that's one of the characteristics of mastery is as we awaken more to the divine in us, that divine is consistently present, whether we're in relationship with an adversary or in a relationship with a friend or in a relationship with a stranger. And I don't know how he treated, if they had grocery clerks, they had merchants certainly, but I don't know how he treated the invisible people in his world, like we treat a bank clerk or a grocery checkout person or whatever. People that are kind of invisible don't mean anything to us. They had those kind of people in their life too. And I'm quite sure that he treated them the same way. He treated his friends and his enemies, and that he was the same to them, and that nobody to him was invisible. That's another aspect about self-mastery. When you're in the presence of a master, you feel, felt, and heard, and cared for. And I wish I could say that was always true when people were in my presence, but I know it isn't. Sometimes I miss it. I don't give them enough attention. I don't respond. I don't make them feel like they're really important enough that I'm giving them my full attention. If you're in the presence of a master, you feel like you're there and they're with you and they're connected to you. So that ability of their soul to reach out and connect to yours is another facet of mastery. The ability of our own soul, not our personality level, but our own soul, to reach into another being and find that soul in them and speak to that. Not just speak to people who believe the same we do, or people who have the same politics we do, or people that we like and are more comfortable with than others, but to speak to the soul in everybody we encounter. That's another facet of mastery, to be able to do that. So some of the masters that I have meant a lot to me in the past were Jesus, who I've said already, Yeshua. And it's interesting, I didn't know Glenda was going to mention Yogananda, but he's another big one for me. And that book, the autobiography, is one of the best spiritual books ever, in my opinion. And when it was in 1972, so I was like 21 years old. And I was in a bookstore walking around looking at the psychic stuff, because I was into psychic stuff back then. And there was a spiritual section on the other side of the bookstore, and Yogananda's autobiography was over there. And it had, at that time, his face picture on the front of it. And I was standing in the bookstore, and somebody said, "Stephen," clear as a bell, called out my name. And I turned around, and there was nobody there. But as I turned around 180 degrees, I was looking straight across the bookstore into his eyes on the picture of that book. And I went, "Oh my God, I think I should get this book." And that book opened up, like Glenda was saying, it opened her heart, or however she put that. Wow, that was a transformational book for me too. And then what happens for me, which I don't claim to be unique at all, but what happened to me was these masters that I felt personally connected with, like Yogananda, I began to have inner experiences with. I began to have experiences with them in my dreams and in my meditations. And whether you think so or not, or whether there's other reasons for it, to me, I was literally connecting with them. You know, not thinking about them, but actually connecting with their essence, their soul. And inwardly, in my prayers and meditations and study, they were assisting me, you know, and helping me to awaken myself, even though they're no longer living in the body. So that's another facet, is that just because a master is now deceased out of the physical form does not mean they're not readily available and accessible to souls who seek them out. And then another one was, for me, Socrates was a big one. He was phenomenal at helping people to get in touch with what they actually knew inside, deeper than what they had been taught or what was expected of them culturally. But in fact, the word educare, which is where we get education, means to draw out from within. Socrates was really good at that. And the main way he did it was not to teach in the way we might think. His main thing was questions. If he was teaching me or Glenda, instead of saying, well, God is like this or God is like that, he'd be saying, so Stephen, what do you think about this God thing? When you experience God, what happens? When you think you're having a divine experience, what's happening? How can you describe that? Why is it that you think that's divine? What is it that you really know about the divine? And he'd be asking questions that make us look deeper inside ourselves. I think that's another quality of mastery, is asking both ourselves and those we're in relationship with those deeper questions. Not always giving them answers, but raising the questions, having them look. Well, what is that like? You know, we talk about the inner light all the time, and the unity and 9/11. And, you know, so what is that? What is your inner light? Where is it? How do you find it? How do you know what it is? Begin to look at some of those facets. St. Francis, as I mentioned earlier, was another one. I really share his affinity with animals. But the other thing was, he was just unfailingly simple in the way he approached life, and unfailingly kind, not just to people, but to creatures as well. And one of the things he actually taught was, if human beings can be cruel to God's lesser creatures, they will be cruel to one another. And that we need to learn not to be cruel to any other being. We need to have loving kindness and compassion for all beings we encounter. So that's an important aspect of this love, this divine love, that it doesn't have favorites in the sense of, well, I'm more important than somebody who's not on a spiritual path, so God likes me better. Well, you know, I'm more important than my dog. You know, God loves my dog, and God loves me. That so-called hierarchy of importance is really an ego thing that we do, and masters are not. They don't fall for that. You know? So they can see the real you, no matter who you're pretending to be. And that's another facet, is they have incredible perception of where you as a soul are, regardless of what front or face you may be trying to put on it. They can see through that. And I've also met I've been in the presence of the Dalai Lama a number of times, and he uses humor in a phenomenal way. I was at a conference with him in Chicago one time, and there was a discussion. There were many other faiths represented there, and there got to be quite an argument about abortion and whether abortion was okay or not okay. And there were strong advocates for it and strong advocates against it, all based on their particular religious understanding. And so there was a lot of argument, and these different leaders on stage were trying to address, the Catholic leader was trying to address their position, and so on. And it turned out to be a rather contentious argument. At some point, one of the audience members said, I'd like to hear what the Dalai Lama has to say about abortion. And everybody paused, because it was like, is he going to take a stand for it and upset all the people who are against it? Is he going to take a stand against it and upset all the people who are for it? How's he going to answer this? And he smiled. He had that cute little giggly laugh he has, and he said, well, I'm no expert, obviously, because, you know, I'm not married and I don't have any children. He said, but The one thing I can tell you is if all of you were monks like me, it wouldn't be an issue. So, and it just, that humor it didn't really answer the question, but it answered what was needed. It broke up all of that tension, and people started laughing and started relating again on a different level than getting caught up in all that anxiety and politic of it. That was exactly what was needed to break that up. So sometimes another quality of mastery is the master will not answer the question you're asking. The master will answer what you need to hear. And sometimes that's at a much deeper level than you're aware of at the moment. So sometimes you'll get messages from masters, and 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months down the road, you'll go, oh my God, I get it. I just got it. I just get what they're talking about. And at the time, you weren't quite able to grasp it yet, but they knew that's what you needed to hear. So I also was in the presence of one of the Indian gurus. There's a tradition in India called Sant Mat, and it means the path of the masters, interestingly enough. It's a phenomenal, interesting path. Their current teacher is an Indian named Gurinder Singh, and I've been able to sit in satsang with him a number of times also. He's still alive. And the thing that's amazing to me about him is that 2 things, and then I'll be quiet again for a minute, but because I have a lot of master stories. But when people were addressing him, he had Q&A sessions after his satsang or discourse, and some of the people were quite adversarial to him and were very challenging, and some of the people were just very, very loving, adoring devotees of his, and he had both. And again, I noticed, like I described about Yeshua, the way he treated both of them was the same. He wasn't defensive with the people who were questioning and pushing and kind of adversarial. He wasn't put off. He was kind and warm and loving and welcoming, just like he was with his ardent devotees. So again, I saw that same consistency of being able to be in that loving space, even when challenged, which I consider mastery. And this may or may not be meaningful, but to me it was really powerful. I remember very, very, very clearly many, many, many inner experiences with Yeshua. And thinking about Jesus is fine, and that's great. Having beliefs about him, that's fine too. But being really able to be in the presence of his soul is a whole other thing. And looking into his eyes, looking into his face, and the light that's present there, the love that's present there, the depth that's present there, it was phenomenal. I remember those really clearly. And when I was able to actually look into Gurinder's eyes for a moment from where I was, and him into mine, even though his face looks totally different, he's a totally different person, he's not the reincarnation of Jesus, any of that stuff, the light that was coming out of him was the same. It was the same. And it was like, oh my God, this really is one light. This really is the one light of God. And it's expressing uniquely through the different masters. But it's not a different light. It's the same light. And it's the same light that's in me and in you and in Glenda and in all of us who are gathered here. It's the same light. There's not a different Holy Spirit for Jesus than there is for us. There's not a different, Ishwara for the Hindus than there is for us. There's not a different, it's the same light. So one of the things that I've noticed is that when people really are masters, when you hear their voice, when you see their face, when you feel their touch, it's the same. It's one presence. It's one light. And the last thing I'll share about that is there's a teaching in ancient Judaism. It's a Kabbalistic teaching. And it's about this great Rebbe who is what is kind of an affectionate word for master in there, if you will. A great teacher, a great master. And there's this Rebbe who is considered one of the greatest ever. And so there's a small village, and one of the teachers there was going to travel a very long distance to see this Rebbe. And he went and spent time with the Rebbe, and he came back to his little village, and they were all agog. And it's like, what's the Rebbe like, and what did he teach you, and what did he have to say, and what were his messages like? And he said, I don't really know. I wasn't paying attention to what he was teaching in the synagogue. And they were like, you weren't paying attention to what he was teaching in the synagogue? Well, what were you doing? And he said, I watched how he put on his clothes and how he tied his shoes. And what he then, and they were all confused, and what he explained to them was, I wanted to see how he lived in his everyday life. Because that's what I need to learn. How to do this in my everyday life. Not in the synagogue, not in the temple, but when I'm living every day, when I wake up. How do I do this? So I watched how he lived. And that's what he taught me. And I think that's a really powerful story for all of us in our heroes or our masters or our teachers that we choose to follow and study with, whether they're historical or present or both. And I think that's important for us to remember. Whether you know it or not, you're the answer to somebody's prayer. And whether you know it or not, you're somebody's teacher. And they're watching you. They're not just watching you when you're teaching or thinking you're in the teacher role. They're watching you all the time. You know, my puppy watches me all the time. Not when I'm just trying to train him or play with him or trying to teach him something. He's watching me all the time. And what I do and how I live and who I am, he's learning from all the time he's with me. And that's true of all of us. And I think if we can bear in mind, and we learn that about ourselves as well, even when we're alone with ourselves, who are we? What are we thinking? How are we carrying ourselves? Where's our focus? And are we with that divine and immersed in that divine, even when we're alone? Are we teaching ourselves, if you will, while we're living? So that to me is some of the things that I wanted to share. And I think I'm thinking now, because Glenda's inspired me, I may actually do a little series, I'm thinking about this, of different masters that I've both studied and worked with, either historical or contemporary, and having a chance to go into more with that, because we are so blessed. I said I'd shut up and I haven't yet, so I'll try to stop after this. We are so blessed. If you study history, these teachings that you hear week after week with Glenda, or week after week with me, or different places that you hear these things, you hear these freely with no threat to your life, week after week after week, with no effort on your part except to click a button or to walk into a classroom. Do you know that for thousands and thousands of years, this was really hard to find? And you had to go through rigorous apprenticeship before you got exposed to any of these higher teachings. It was really hard. And in some cases, and still many places in the world, this was under threat of death if you studied this sort of stuff. We are immensely blessed to have this so available to us. So thank God for Glenda doing these programs, and thank God for living where we do now, that the spiritual teachers are so, and the masters are so readily available to us.
Thank you, Stephen. And we are so blessed by you as well. And you, great segue as we wrap up. Mastery is about action. You know, it's about how we are with one another all of the time, regardless of what's going on. Pema Chodron wrote, "We don't set out to save the world. We set out to wonder how people are doing and to reflect on how our actions affect other people's hearts." And I love that. It kind of encapsulated what Stephen just shared with us, that when we can begin to live from this place of awareness of how everything we say, everything we do, from how we get dressed in the morning to how we drive down the road, how that affects the hearts of other people. And I want to close, as Stephen and Kat get ready to take us into meditation, with this affirmation that came out of Paramahansa Yogananda's book that I just loved. Let my soul smile through my heart, and my heart smile through my eyes, that I may scatter rich smiles in sad hearts. So the action, which I think is what one of the things Stephen spoke to, the action doesn't have to be some grand gesture. Yeah, just being, just the willingness to be present, the willingness to scatter your smiles among the sad hearts. So I invite you to get comfortable, to take a couple of deep breaths in as Kat and Stephen prepare to lead us in meditation. Yes. I am not the things my family did. I am not the voices in my head. I am not the pieces of the brokenness inside. I am light. 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 I'm not the mistakes that I have made, any of the things that cause me pain. I am not the pieces of the dream I left behind. I am light. 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 I am light, I am light. I am not the color of my eyes. I am not the skin on the outside. I am not my age. I am not my race. My soul inside is alive. Divinity defined. I am the God on the inside. I am a star, a piece of it all. I am love.
So let's just take that wonderful message and wonderful energy and move inside with our eyes closed and realize that those are far more than words. That's really the truth of who we are. That we, this moment, in this space, right now, each one of us, are that living, loving essence of God in manifest expression. And that inner light that we are is constantly radiating in every direction to what stands in front of us, to what stands behind us, to what stands to the left or right, beneath or above. That inner light is radiating to all that has been in our past, to all that will come forward in our future, and to all that is present with us and within us this moment. That light is infinite, expressing through this finite portal of our individual being. And that light permeates and penetrates all things. It has no barriers. There is no wall that can stop love. There is nothing that can resist the light. In the darkest dark of rooms, if there is one tiny candle lit or one light switch flipped, there is no struggle with the darkness. The light just breaks forward, and the darkness is overwhelmed by the light. There is no fight, there is no resistance. There is just light. It's not a matter of fighting the darkness within yourself, or in others, or in the world. It is a matter of turning on the light, first in ourselves, that it may illuminate and inspire others to light their own candles, or to be lit from ours. So as this light that we are right now, in this moment, and always, there is nothing we lack. There is nothing that can harm us. There is nothing that can diminish us or change the light that we are. And we, in this moment and every moment, we are free to give expression to that light, to call it forward in our thoughts, call it forward in our speech, call it forward in our action, call it forward in our prayer and in our meditation and in our studies. Call it forward in our relationships, that light may be given free rein to bless all with which we are related, to uplift, to heal, and to bring peace and joy to the deepest part of ourselves and to all beings we encounter. May the reality of that living, radiant light of love in you, that is your essence, may you awaken now more fully to that reality. May that knowing anchor itself firmly, even in your physical consciousness. And may you give yourself permission at every level to open to experience the wonder of that love and the incredible beauty that you are.
And bringing that light into this present moment. I invite you, when you are ready, to open your eyes. Stephen and Kat, thank you for sharing the platform with me this morning, for being here with us. Thank you for the people that will be on Facebook Live later, who were on, the other live that we were on, YouTube Live that we were on, and on Zoom. We're so glad that you are here. One of the ways that we acknowledge our blessings is by celebrating the abundance that flows to us and through us and from us, by giving to where we are spiritually fed. Even though we are socially distanced, and even though we are all in the comfort of our homes or in our sanctuary this morning, Unity of Fort Wayne Spiritual Center continues to thrive because of your generosity, because of your blessings. And so be aware that you can go on our webpage at unityfw.org, and there is a donate button there so that you can give to us online. If you have downloaded the app, Unity FW is the app that's in your app store. We're really encouraging, especially right now, for everyone to do that, because it allows us to communicate with you all at once through your phone. That you can go on the app and see all of the calendar events. You can find out when we're online. If you got on your app this morning, there was actually a link, a Zoom link, so you could have pushed on the Zoom link and joined us from Zoom, just straight from your phone. So we are doing our best to make that as quick and as easy as possible for you to stay connected to us. And on the app, there is also a donate button. I am in the office every week, so you can also drop it off at the office door or mail a check to us at 3232 Crescent Avenue. So I invite you to put your hand on your heart so that we can bless the gifts that we have received this week and the gifts that are coming our way by saying our blessing. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I am joy-filled and grateful. Thank you guys so much. So just a couple of announcements, and then we're going to pray out and sing out. The daily word, I am in the process of mastering YouTube Live, which will allow me to do the daily word service Monday through Friday. On Wednesday, Susan Heine steps in for me to give me a little bit of a break and does the daily word meditation, which is at noon. We call it a purposeful pause during your week. So we invite you at noon, it's from 12 until 12:30, to join us on YouTube Live and later in the day on Facebook. Monday and Wednesday evenings are the new times for our evening meditation. Bob and I had a discussion about what we wanted to do moving forward. We have decided to do evening meditation via Zoom until the first week of June. And then in June, I'll be leading on Monday evenings, and Bob will be leading on Wednesday evenings, and we'll keep you posted about that. On Tuesdays at 1 o'clock is Conscious Conversations with Susan. That is also on Zoom. You can find in our newsletter the link for that, or you can find that link also on the app. That will be also on Zoom until the first week of June. All right. Let's close by putting our hands in prayer position as we say our prayer for protection together. The light of God surrounds me. I am light. The love of God enfolds us. I am love. The power of God protects us. I am power. The presence of God watches over us. I am presence. Wherever I am, God is, and I am divine.
And all is well.
And all is well. And all is well. Kat's going to sing Blessing to the World. It's a real easy chant. If you know it, we invite you to sing from home.
And as we sing, what I would ask you to intend is to more deeply this week bring into awareness the gift that you are in every single moment, every single situation, even when things aren't going well. Embrace it. Find light within it. You are the heart, you are the hands, you are the voice of spirit on earth. And who you are and all you do is a blessing to the world. We are the heart, we are the hands, we are the voice of spirit on earth. And who we are and all we do is a blessing to the world. I am the heart, I am the hands, I am the voice of spirit on earth. And who I am and all I do is a blessing to the world. You are the heart, you are the hands, you are the heart, you are the hands. We are the heart, we are the hands, we are the heart, yes, we are the hands. I am the hands, I am the heart, I am the hands, I am a blessing to the world. I am a blessing to the world.
With infinite love and gratitude, go bless the world. Amen.